In the golden era of tech, you'd get almost an entire year to fully onboard to a company, project, and team. And it made sense. Big tech is big. Lots of code, lots of technologies, and lots of unknown. Well, those good old days are over. Now you'd be lucky if your manager gave you a quarter to fully ramp up, after which the expectations are you hit the ground running, especially if you're a senior engineer like me. I thought the 6 months it took for me to get my new software engineering job offer at LinkedIn were my darkest, most stressful days, but that couldn't have been further from the truth. My first 6 months at LinkedIn were filled with imposter syndrome, intense self-doubt, and crippling anxiety. And during my mid-year review, my manager told me I wasn't meeting expectations. This is the story of what happened and how I turned the ship around. And because I'm all corporate and professional now, this is the agenda of today's presentation. I'm gonna start off by giving you some context on the tech landscape, LinkedIn as a company, and then my specific team dynamics. Because I'm telling you now, onboarding is hard. The chips were stacked against me, and big tech isn't what it used to be. But if you're gonna be convinced by that, you have to understand the type of environment I was stepping into. Then I'll tell you about my first week and the onboarding plan, a literal document for my first 30, 60, and 90 days. We'll talk about my first project, and this isn't one of those side projects you post on GitHub. This is an actual company for millions and billions of users. After all this, I'm gonna tell you about that scary conversation with my manager. But all's well ends well, because at the end, I'm going to tell you how I turned the ship around. All my mistakes, all the lessons along the way, and what I would have done differently if I were to start today. Specifically, I'm gonna go through these 7 tips, and you're gonna wanna stay till the end because I don't have to tell you that the tech market is trash. I've made videos on this. You can look up what other people are saying, and if you've tried to apply to jobs right now, you know it's crazy. It's the wild, wild west out there. And LinkedIn is no different. For the past 3 years, we've been in a hiring freeze. And actually, October of last year, when I started recruiting, was when they had their first round of layoffs ever, which ultimately means I got insanely lucky to get a job offer in this tech market. But that also, I was the first new person my team had seen for the past 3 years. And that's not an exaggeration. At LinkedIn, most people either come right out of college, or when they do end up coming mid in their career, they just stay forever. So people either have 0 years of experience or like 7. Someone like me, with 1 job under his belt, 3 years of experience, is very rare. Also at LinkedIn, we don't have a SWE2 position. We have software engineer and then directly senior software engineer, which means my title, senior software engineer, is a huge band, anywhere from 3 years of experience all the way to 7 or 8. And this is gonna make sense when I continue talking about the process. Now, big companies usually have onboarding boot camps, but because hiring was frozen, LinkedIn stopped doing that. There was a self-paced bootcamp version, but it was nowhere close to the real deal. There was no cohort, there were no instructors, it was just me watching videos, and if I had questions, there was no one to ask. At LinkedIn, everything is built in-house. Our database, our API integration, the way we write Java, it's like functional Scala kind of vibes. And so everything is new. Nothing I learned at Bolt, except for maybe general design patterns, was actually going to help me. So I get to work on my first day, which I do remember is December 18th, 2023. And you might be asking why in the holidays, but I did it on purpose. For one, there are a bunch of benefits that refresh per year, and so I wanted to take advantage of those, but also because the holidays are slower. There's code freeze, people are going on vacation, and so it's kind of like a nice, slow, soft launch. I can get help, but nothing is like that high priority that it's all hands on deck. My manager shares a document with me. It's a 30, 60, 90-day plan, and I'm looking at it right now. I'll probably show it on screen. It's very basic. It's like join some Slack channels, get some coffee with some people, take some trainings, nothing that's gonna actually help me do my job better. There's a couple links and design docs I can read, but again, a lot of the coding is gonna end up being done by me with my hands when I touch the code base. And no one is really helping me understand that. And yes, I know the best way to learn is just by reading code and doing, and we're gonna talk about those as potential tips, but you do expect a little bit of hand-holding when you start. To be fair, I was given an engineering buddy, but again, there was time off and vacation, and so I didn't really get to meet her that much, and she was also busy leading a project that I'm actually gonna end up working with her on. And that brings me to the next category, which is my very first project. Now, you'd expect a new engineer to be working on bugs and small fixes for the first quarter, maybe 2 quarters, but it seems like senior engineers are just given the ropes and said, just go. And that's what happened with me. We were working on a project called Human Handoff, which are the next steps of a sponsored message. So if you've ever gotten a DM on LinkedIn where someone's like, hey, you should check out this webinar, click this link, and you can click it and go somewhere. Imagine if a company reaches out and they're like, hey, you might be interested in this product and you want to learn more. So we're going to throw you in a group chat with a representative of that company as a human handoff. So you can chat with them and see if it's going to be a good fit. I was in charge of the entire persistence layer at the back end, which basically means when an advertiser wants to do a human handoff campaign, they would have to select a representative to be the person on their side, that salesperson. And when they select them, it needs to be persisted through all layers of the stack. It needs to be saved in the database, go through the API layer. We need to let all the other teams know. And so there's a storage part of it and then also a lookup. Now, this probably to you sounds like crud, not that hard, but in a big tech company, it's actually quite complex, especially for someone that has never touched the code and really not coded in Java since college. Without going into too many details of the actual project, where if you're interested, I can make another video on it. 6 months go by and my manager and I sit down and he just drops a bomb. He's like, I went through calibration, we did performance review, expectations of the company have been increasing, and my manager basically says that I'm not meeting expectations, and that if I continue in this way for the next 6 months for my yearly review, I might have problems. And this is so scary because I've had anxiety my entire first 6 months because literally no one's been helping me, and I'm gonna tell you why that is and how I kind of got around that. But it was literally like to the point that I would be DMing people like, hey, can we hop on a call and pair? And they would just be like, no. I remember there was this one time I had a problem on my terminal, command wasn't running, and so I literally took a screenshot of the terminal, drew an arrow with paint, and then DM'd the person, and then they responded almost instantly. But there was this friction to just hop on a call. Like, people were so protective of their time. Almost no meetings, no one wanted to kind of hop on and pair, and this kind of startup spirit wasn't there, and I'm learning that's just how big companies are. So now you have some context on exactly what happened, a quick overview of my first 6 months. Let's get to the more important part of this video, which is how I ended up turning that ship around. Because I went from not meeting expectations to not just meeting them, but becoming a core part of the team, and I think I'm on track to exceed expectations this next quarter. So if my manager's watching, please help me do that. Lesson number 1, use AI. And I know this sounds ridiculous because of course that's the first thing you should be doing, but look at it from my perspective. While I was at Bolt, we didn't have ChatGPT and all these things, so we just relied on each other. Like sure, Stack Overflow and you could Google things, but after a couple of tries, you would just message someone who understood what you were working on and ask for their help. And because they'd been at the company for a little while, they could help you very quickly. And so that was my modus operandi. That's what I did at LinkedIn. I would try a little bit, but for me, trying on your second week of work, like, well, what can you even try? So you're just asking a lot of dumb questions. But these are the questions that you should be asking ChatGPT, or even better, something like Copilot, which has the context of your entire workflow and repository. You should be asking it questions because it can answer them just like this person will. In fact, it can answer it better because what I realized was most people don't even know the answer. So when you ask them a question, they're going to do the work that you should be doing, which is digging into the code, asking AI, doing a bunch of consolidating until they figure out the answer. And so the reason people weren't responding to me was because I was taking away time, but also mental energy. They're gonna have to put in actual work and context switch because, you know, these people aren't mean. If it truly was that simple of a question, they would just answer me. But a lot of these questions were more in depth. It required digging into code that they hadn't touched in a while, and so they were gonna have to do as much work as I would have to do. Lesson number 2 ties into this. Stop DMing people. What I mean by DM is a one-on-one private message. I was literally asking the same question to multiple people at the same time. And then if someone responded, I would go to the others and be like, oh, never mind, figured it out. Crazy, I can't believe I did that. Like, I'm not even talking group chats, literally one-on-one messages. And we use Slack at LinkedIn, and I understand that when you join a new company, it's scary to put yourself out there and ask messages in a more public setting, especially if you think the questions are dumb and super basic. And you know, people have been there 3 years, so to all of them, every question I'm gonna ask is going to be so simple. What I should have done was just swallowed my ego and just asked in public settings. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, because it helps other people help you. And this is good life advice. Whenever you want help from someone, you'll have to make it worth their time. And I know that sounds shitty. I hope your friends just do it selflessly, but for most people, it needs to benefit them in some way. And so you could imagine if you're DMing people and they're responding to you, no one else at the company knows that. But if you're asking in a Slack channel and they're responding, then there's some visibility aspect of it. Like now you're becoming that teammate who's helping other people. People are seeing your name and your photo pop up and you're always jumping in threads, and that's really, really good. Secondly, selfishly for me, there's a lot more people that can be looking at my question and might have the context and can respond. Asking one person is way less efficient than asking 10. And so by putting in a Slack channel or a more public setting, I'm not only making it worth their time, but I'm also increasing the odds that the right person who can actually help me will help me. And you know, just today in the morning while I was writing code, I was blocked on something and I posted it in the right channel and I got help in literally 1 minute. And yeah, sure, they have an on-call rotation and there's some reason for that, but the SLA for getting help is not that bad if you know where to ask the right question. So instead of putting it in DMs, spend a little bit of time figuring out where you should be doing that. There's a technology we use at LinkedIn called Glean, which allows you to basically search through everything at your company. Slack messages, GitHub, code, documents, you know, whatever. And so I will literally ask Glean AI sometimes, hey, I have this proto problem or this Avro schema problem. Where should I be asking? They might be like, oh, this Slack channel called Proto Avro Help. Go figure. Lesson number 3, read code. And this connects to the first two in that whenever you ask someone for help, they're going to also be reading code. Like, even though I'm a subject matter expert for some things at the company now, if someone asks me a question, I still have to go back to my old PRs and remind myself what I did, because there's just so many moving parts at a big company and you're context switching so often that I don't really remember what I did. I knew it really well when I was doing it. So if you'd asked me in that moment, I would have been the most helpful person in the world. But now, 2 months later, I don't even know if it's deprecated. Maybe the documentation is stale. Like, I actually need to go do a little bit of work, spend an hour reminding myself so I can give you the right answer. Lesson number 4, make decisions. And this is especially important if you're more senior in your career. What I realized was when it comes to being an owner, especially on the senior engineer track, you want to be someone who's taking things off other people's plate. You want to be someone who is truly owning something, and that usually means making decisions. When I first came to LinkedIn, I operated like I did at Bolt, at a startup. I would write up a document, bunch of pros and cons, and then I would be like, here's option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What do you guys think? And I would send it out, I'd circulate it with my peers, and I'd wait for other people to make a decision for me. And by definition, by doing that, I don't feel as senior as I should because I'm asking other people for feedback. And there's nothing wrong with that. You want to workshop your ideas, you want to collaborate, all that is fine. But you want to come into every single meeting or discussion with a recommendation. And that recommendation might be wrong. And that's okay. And I think that is the biggest learning I've had so far. It is okay to be wrong. In fact, sometimes it is desired. It is better to be wrong and fail than to not decide. And I think this is also just good advice for life. Being more decisive will lead to better outcomes. That's just a fact, right? And that's why CEOs have this very hard job, but at the end of the day, it just comes to deciding. They just need to pick something. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And so one big change I made after my conversation with my manager was that I just started deciding things. I would still write up all the options as like an appendix, and I'd be like, this is what we're doing. And then I'd wait. And if people really cared, they might tell me, no, we shouldn't, and that's okay. But that's very different than going to other people and being like, hey, what do you think about this, right? You want to come in with confidence and charisma, and then if you're wrong, you're wrong. Lesson number 5, update frequently and often. Part of performing well is letting everyone else know you're performing well. And yes, that is politicking and it's a visibility problem, but that's how the world works. It's the same way you get promoted. If you're gonna wait for your manager to tell you, hey, you're doing great work, I'd love to promote you, you're never gonna get promoted. Instead, you need to go into every meeting and be like, hey, I deserve to be promoted. Here's why, help me get promoted. You need to take control of your life. And that's the same way you need to take control of your performance. And the thing I didn't do in the first 6 months is I just didn't make enough splashes. I was kind of like DMing people, I was working on my little code, and no one really knew anything. And so to them, obviously I wasn't meeting expectations, even if I truly believed I was. It's because I wasn't marketing my work. And yes, a good manager will market it for you, but you also have to make it easy for them to do that. So whenever you're working on things, it is equally, if not more important, to be visible. Post on Slack threads, post timelines. If something's at risk, call it out, even if it makes you look bad. Like, hey, I might not finish this. Just let people know what you're doing and that you're working on things, because the more they know that, the better you're going to look. And when it comes to performance, your manager doesn't have to do much work to convince other people because they'll say your name and everyone will be like, oh yeah, Naman, he was working on tracking, right? Oh yeah, cool, yeah, I remember he was in this channel and like, yeah, we synced on this and that. You want to be someone people know. And there are other ways to do this too. Show up to office hours, meet your skip manager, go to Q&As, go to town halls, be a physical presence. This is why turning on your camera is so important on Zoom calls, is because you're a human that people recognize, and looking like you're working is just as important as the work you're actually doing. Ideally, you're doing both. But I'm being honest, like presentation matters. And I know I'm wearing this and I probably wear normal clothes to work, but that's why people say dress to impress, because all of these things make a huge difference. Lesson 6, take things off people's plate. And this is a little bit different than making decisions. That's one part of it. Making decisions allows other people not to have to make decisions. But this is more about finding opportunities to just own things. Volunteer for something. If your manager's like, hey, there's this area, the answer is just yes. Honestly, one of the biggest learnings after my first 6 months was because you just keep grabbing things off someone's plate. So when your manager gets a query, they can now just be like, actually, can you just ask Naman? Like, actually, Naman is the person who knows that. Or Bob is the person who knows that. And becoming that person who knows things is how you become indispensable. And that is that senior engineer. Take the advice a little bit with a grain of salt though, because this is very big tech specific. At a startup, it might be a little bit different from what I understand. Cheers.